as we are discussing the paranoia growing international threataganda. So hopefully that piece kind of sets the stage and tells you where we are and how the hell we got here. And of course, we again want to reference they keep talking that this would be a Mumbai-style attack. And again, if you dig back into the archives on Media Monarchy, the Telegraph reported that British men were among the terrorists. Mumbai perpetrators showed combat training. We have CIA foreknowledge of the Mumbai attacks. U.S. warned India in October of the potential attack. Some of the guys saying they were trained by the Pakistan Navy, aided by Indian authorities, evidence being deliberately ignored, and an arrest that connects India to Israel and U.S. intelligence. There was a hoax war call. Again, all the strange things that surround these massive terror events. We mentioned that now, kicking off in the States, we're soaking in it right now, is Operation Railsafe. The law enforcement surge on trains and other mass transit in the country this weekend. Again, as the international threataganda grows with France and the UK and Sweden and Japan and everyone freaking out that Al-Qaeda is going to get us. So a little background to this. Also going on is the recent conviction of the Times Square time bomber, Faisal Shahzad. Lightning fast justice in this case, my friends. So let's get the background on that and how it connects to Operation Railsafe.
The failed Times Square bomber was in federal court for sentencing today, and Brian Ross is here at the desk now, and he's been following that story. What happened in court?
Well, Faisal Shahzad showed no remorse, and the judge showed no mercy. Life sentence, no parole. It's really only because of his incompetence that his bomb in Times Square last May did not go off, killing 40, 50, 60 people. In court today, as he was sentenced by Judge Miriam Cedarbaum, he shouted, "Allah Akbar," and then he gave a warning. He said, "Brace yourselves. The war with Muslims has just begun." He went on to say, "The defeat of the U.S. is now imminent, God willing." He represents, really, Diane, the next wave of al-Qaeda's threats. Homegrown terrorists. He's of Pakistani descent. The current threat involves Britons of Pakistani descent, French of Algerian descent, and Germans of Afghan and Turkish descent. The disaffected young people who are prepared to go back and fight against their adopted countries.
And you told us last night about a long-standing plan to increase security on the nation's transit systems all across the country. Did it happen?
Certain teams they call Viper teams were sent out today, and this Friday we'll see an action called Operation Railsafe, which were reported all along the routes of Amtrak. Local and national police will be fanning out. They call it an exercise, but it's being done in conjunction with European rail operations as well, as the threat continues to worry everyone.
All right, everybody watching. Thank you, Brian Ross.
Be afraid. So we see that these things are always already planned. Oh, well, we already planned to put in the naked body scanners. It just so happened that we had a catalyzing underwear bomber event that gave us the political capital to scare the hell out of the sheeple so we could ram it down their throats. So Operation Railsafe had already been planned, but of course now it's basically a drill flipping live. And we see that anytime these drills are going on, there's just a high propensity for it to flip live. And they mention those young kids who are falling victim to Al-Qaeda. Even if you believe all the official stories, it's because the Western elites and the finance oligarchs and their military enforcement arms have destroyed their countries for generations. So justifiably, they're a little pissed off. Unfortunately, with a little bit of research, you can uncover that most of the terror events have intelligence connections in one way or another, whether it's informants or whether it's drills or whether it's shady private contractors connected to the terrorists. Those are the parts that never make it to the front page. They're able to trumpet the big terror bus to get you to dump your water and take off your shoes and go through the naked body scanner and God knows what else is coming. They can use it. So posted up as a whole raft of updates on this Terranoia post. We'll get through all the geopolitical, police state international, and war horror updates because they're all so interconnected. And we'll start it off, and again, I think this will help elucidate and wrap up this terror hysteria with an article from Paul Joseph Watson, and it is now October, my friends. October surprise, terror hysteria recycled in election ploy. The establishment media has given the full court press to announcements from U.S. and European authorities that airport lobbies are being targeted for terror attacks in a recycled version of the laughable 2007 incident in which two mental deficients set fire to a Jeep outside a Glasgow airport, a non-event that authorities hyped beyond all recognition amidst a similar wave of hysteria to that which we're witnessing right now. The October surprise has arrived, and that is now up for debate. An October surprise, we can at least say. And it's a contrived and cynical ploy to frighten Americans into putting their trust back in government by waving the familiar boogeyman of the outside threat. Among the possible targets in the suspected European terror plot are pre-security areas in at least 5 major European airports, law enforcement officials told ABC News. Authorities believe terror teams are prepared to mount a commando-like attack featuring small units and small firearms modeled after the Mumbai attack 2 years ago. Constant references to the Mumbai attack, transport hubs, airport lobbies, and other soft target chatter provide a reasonably clear indication as to who's really behind the ceaseless intensity of terror fear-mongering we've been subjected to over this last week. Since it ultimately emerged that the mastermind behind the Mumbai massacre was CIA agent David Headley, warnings from the same intelligence agencies about similar attacks being planned should be treated as a direct threat. Throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the Central Intelligence Agency played a key role in Operation Gladio, a program of false flag terror attacks on soft targets that were designed to demonize political opposition and to, quote, force the public to turn to the state to ask for greater security, end quote, according to the testimony of Gladio agent Vincenzo Vinciguerra. Operation Gladio, well-known Italian destabilization operation with the CIA. In 2000, an Italian Senate investigation found that the 1980 Bologna train bombing, which killed 85 people, was carried out, quote, by men inside Italian state institutions and men linked to the structures of United States intelligence, end quote. In attempting to force the public to turn to the state to ask for greater security, the establishment hopes to derail the momentum of Tea Party candidates like Rand Paul, and Sharon Angle, whose entire campaigns are built on the premise of turning away from the state and giving power back to the individual. As fraught with problems as this whole Tea Party left-right paradigm meme is, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Manipulating voters by threatening terror worked for the Republicans in 2004, but the Democrats might have to go a step further if they hope to use it as a deciding factor in the upcoming elections. The threat of airport lobbies being targeted is another giveaway. The last time this occurred was in summer '07 when 2 amateur mental deficients described as crazy clown jihadis by bomb experts set fire to some petrol outside Glasgow airport in a pathetic attempt to stage a terror attack. Although people like former Scotland Yard detective John O'Connor described the botched attack as hopeless, incompetent, almost laughable, and amounting to nothing more than a bonfire, while others labeled the incident slapstick idiocy, the corporate media reacted in exactly the same way they're behaving now by ludicrously overhyping the incident as some kind of deadly Al-Qaeda wave of terror. Never forget that the media and the government have been totally discredited over and over again by their complicity in issuing phony terror alerts designed to manipulate elections and frighten the public into slavish acquiescence. Just as former Homeland Security Chief, the first one, Tom Ridge, admitted that Homeland stupidity would issue fake terror alerts, linked to MSNBC, shortly before elections in a bid to influence the outcome during the Bush era, the Obama era is mimicking the same tactic. The reality is that an accident causing deer, peanut allergies, and swimming pools are all actually way more likely to seal your fate than a terror attack. As Ohio State University's John Mueller concludes in a report entitled A False Sense of Insecurity on Cato.org, for all the attention it evokes, terrorism actually causes rather little damage, and the likelihood that any individual will become a victim in most places is microscopic. But the sensationalist media, the power-hungry government, and the salivating experts who head up profitable anti-terror companies all need to feed the beast, and they'll exploit every morsel on offer. Terrorism can only be effective if the relatively minor acts of violence that are perpetrated are given false prominence and artificially inflated to the point where the dread of what's coming next fundamentally alters the way we go about our lives, travel, commerce, and the way we treat others, ultimately until we acquiesce to the terrorist goal, relinquishing our freedoms and living in fear. Since that's the very definition of terrorism, recent events only confirm that the terrorists have already won and that their victory was secured with the enthusiastic support of the government and the media. Authorities have detected a dramatic increase in online chatter among jihadist websites last week in what experts believe could be other terrorists banding together in anticipation of terror attack plans in Europe and hoping to engage themselves in prospective plots, reports ABC News. But don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. The government has blatantly seized upon some keyboard warrior bluff spouted by Muslims on internet forums and used it as propaganda to try and frighten people into voting the establishment back in power, be they Democrats or Republicans. Following the FBI raids on anti-war activists recently, it's clear that the Obama administration now considers its political adversaries as both those on the left who have abandoned their support for Obama over his continuation of the Bush wars, and those on the right who have sworn to resist the seemingly ceaseless march of statism. This probably equates to about 70 or 80% of the politically active Americans who are now labeled domestic terrorists by their own government. Recall that the Department of Defense now considers any form of protest as quote-unquote low-level terrorism. And as we've seen from the MIAC report, the spying case in Pennsylvania, and a host of others in recent years, the federal government defines terrorist propaganda as any material critical of the state. Conservatives who dismissed government-sponsored terror as an invention of the loony conspiracy fringe better brush up on the history of Operation Northwoods, Operation Gladio, 9/11, Oklahoma City bombing, because the Obama administration is by all means ruthless enough to stage a false flag attack and use it to demonize and demolish the reputation of the Tea Party, just as Bill Clinton exploited the FBI-directed Oklahoma City bombing to go after talk radio and the Patriot movement in the 90s. Sound familiar? Indeed, it was only 2 months ago that former Clinton advisor Robert Shapiro wrote in the Financial Times that the only thing that could save Obama's tenuous grip on power was a terror attack on the scale of OKC or 9/11. While the terror alerts about amateur jihadis in caves planning to bomb airport lobbies may be contrived, don't be fooled into thinking that people like Rahm Emanuel, the knife-wielding son of a former Israeli Irgun terrorist who bombed hotels, won't be prepared to resort to desperate measures in a bid to neutralize the snowballing success of an anti-establishment political climate which threatens to seriously impinge on the power monopoly of the Washington elite, the Israeli lobby, and the rest of the New World Order kingpins who are sitting ever more uncomfortably in their ivory towers as the selection gets closer and closer. That piece, October Surprise, Terror Hysteria Recycled in Election Ploy, is from Paul Joseph Watson, and it tied in with the latest gaming of the Google Trends monitor by the InfoWars gang. October Surprise and Terror Hysteria dominated Google Trends a couple of days ago that directly pointed back to this article, again, using these systems against themselves so we can somehow break through the mainstream media gauze of who's hosting American Idol or God knows whatever bread and circus garbage is going on. We can use these tools to break through. You may not like Alex Jones, you may not like this show or that show, but hopefully if you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you know that we don't choose sides and we don't play favorites and choose leaders, and I like this host and he's an agent and blah, blah, blah. That's just more divide and conquer garbage, because ultimately it's pretty much coming down to the multinational corporations versus us. And as long as they can keep us fighting against each other about gays and abortion and illegals and Qurans and all of those things, we're all going to tear each other apart. And the gangsters and banksters and multi-generational serial killers are going to get away with it again.